Today's headlines. Tigray's armed forces anti-aircraft unit downs an Ethiopian military aircraft. Ethiopian authorities intensify calls for the arbitrary detention of Tigrayans. Good evening. I'm Salam Berhana with your news for the evening, and now for the details. Tigray's armed forces anti-aircraft unit guns down an Ethiopian military helicopter. The Mi-35 military helicopter was downed at the Mille front in Afar region on Thursday, November 11th, 2021. This is the 9th military aircraft downed by Tigray's armed forces since the start of the conflict in November, with an aircraft gunned down near Maqala, Abiy Adi, Togoga, Gijet, Joamara, and Mille. A C-130 transport military aircraft was also gunned down on the 23rd of June 2021, just days before Tigray's forces would take counter of Tigray's capital. The Ethiopian government declared a nationwide state of emergency on November 2nd that has allowed Ethiopian authorities to intensify a campaign of terror against Tigrayans that has so far led to their arbitrary arrests, abuses, and closing of businesses. The campaign has also included intensive hate speech against Tigrayans broadcasted on state media and social media platforms. Qalamwarq Mihrata, the head for the Bureau of Trade in the Amhara region, went as far as blaming more than 40,000 of Tigrayans living in Desse for the battlefield defeat of Ethiopian forces. Aragawi Gabra Mikhail has more.
The arbitrary detention of Tigrayans had started long before the outbreak of genocidal war on Tigray. But recent rhetoric has intensified, with Ethiopian authorities openly calling for the indefinite and indiscriminate detention of Tigrayans in internment camps. The most recent and explicit call for the mass detention of Tigrayans was made by the head of the Bureau of Trade in Amhara region.
በርካታ ብሔር ብሔረሰቦች በክልል ውስጥ ይኖራሉ። ከሚኖሩት ብሔር ብሔረሰቦች ደግሞ የትግራይ ተወላጆች አሉ።
There are more than 40,000 Tigrayans living in Desse, and even more are living in other cities of the Amhara region. Though the Tigray residents are not working within a formal government structure, they have internal networks to the enemy can use them as a potential forces whenever they like. But this is not the only case. They are also armed.
Qalamwarq Mihrat unfolded a statement that associated all civilian Tigrayans with Tigray's armed forces. It's sure to endanger many living in different parts of the country. Qalamwarq disregards the constitutional right of Tigrayans as Ethiopian citizens to live in any part of Ethiopia, but says their presence has so far been tolerated by Amhara regional authorities.
እኒህ ኃይሎች እኮ እንደታጠቁ ከተማ ውስጥ ነው የሚኖሩት።
The old Amhara government knew that the residents were working with the enemy and letting them live in peace in the region. They are living in many parts of the Amhara region. What is surprising is the number of such forces is too many in some cities. The government of Amhara region let them live in peace thinking they are our brothers. But they have proved that these residents have a link to the enemy forces.
Mr. Qalamwarq even blames the Tigrayan residents of Desse for the defeat of the Ethiopian and Amhara forces at the Battle of Haik and Desse.
ጠላት ከውጭ ነው ቅድም ያልነውን የተሳሳተ ፕሮፓጋንዳ እየነዛ
For example, in the Battle of Haik and Desse, our forces were defeating the enemy and winning. Only a few enemy forces were entered the town of Desse and spoiled our sacrifice. They used their links in the city to do this. The government of the region should take a lesson from this incident. We can't be patient with them anymore. The Amhara government has no other business other than protecting the Amhara people, and there is nothing above a country and people. Anyone who is suspect of such cases should be kept in camps.
The Ethiopian government declared a state of emergency on November 2, 2021 that allows the arbitrary and indefinite detention of civilians considered suspect. This has further intensified the crackdown of Tigrayans living in different parts of Ethiopia.
The mass detention of Tigrayans continues to intensify, with the United Nations reporting the arrest of 16 United Nations employees and 72 truck drivers working on delivering humanitarian aid into Tigray. Thousands of Tigrayans have been arrested across different parts of Ethiopia, with government officials and activists closely associated with the state calling for all Tigrayans to be held in internment camps. Abel Zagabu has more on this.
As the arbitrary detention of Tigray continues across different parts of Ethiopia, Ethiopian authorities have detained 72 truck drivers working for World Food Program in Tigray to deliver humanitarian assistance for the millions in urgent need, in addition to 16 staff members of the United Nations.
As far as I know, no explanation given to us by why these staff members are detained. There are 16 remaining in detention, and 6 have been released. So that's the breakdown. They come from various UN agencies. They're all national staff. It is imperative that they be released.
U.S. State Department spokesperson also said that arrests based on identity is completely unacceptable and asked for their immediate release.
We understand from reports, as you alluded to, that those arrested are Tigrayan. Ethiopian government security force harassment and detention on the basis of ethnicity is completely unacceptable.
The arrest of 72 truck drivers is just the latest in the continued and systematic attempt to obstruct aid coming into Tigray. Truck drivers have so far been subject to physical and psychological harassment, in addition to being stranded in Afar for months.
Tigray External Affairs Office released its weekly briefing highlighting the humanitarian catastrophe that is unfolding in Tigray due to the all-encompassing siege that's been ongoing for over 4 months now. The statement said that the Ethiopian government's horrific record on Tigray is now being eclipsed by the deliberate weaponization of starvation. Sabla Warq Lama has the details.
Tigray External Affairs Office has released this weekly briefing on November 10, highlighting the deliberate obstruction of humanitarian aid from reaching Tigray by blocking the only viable route from Samara or Ala Maghala, calling this policy inhumane and calling on the international community to go beyond the condemnation and take a meaningful action. The statement highlighted that the obstruction has only intensified, with no trucks carrying humanitarian aid being allowed into Tigray since October 18, as 369 trucks carrying humanitarian aid are stranded in Samara. The statement also emphasizes that the obstruction of aid has included the denial of transit of humanitarian workers, quoting the UN OCHA report that says 14 humanitarian workers were denied transit at a checkpoint in Sardo, Afar. The statement also emphasized the impact of the blockade on the health system, saying that it's preventing the gradual rehabilitation of Tigray's health system after the deliberate and systematic destruction of 80% of health facilities in Tigray, stating that health partners in Shira were forced to administer 60,000 doses of expired drugs after conducting chemical analysis. In addition, the statement discussed the visit of UN Emergency Relief Coordinator Martin Griffiths on November 7. He made a one-day visit to Maghala, where he met humanitarian partners and engaged with the government officials on the need of humanitarian access. He also met with women affected by the conflict and called on the world to help them imagine a better future. AU envoy for the Horn of Africa, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, also had a brief stay in Maghala with President Debretsion Gebremichael and Presidential Advisor Getachew Redda. The statement suggests that he may be seeking a non-military solution to the crisis, but states the government's reservations considering a pattern of dishonesty and belligerence from Abiy Ahmed's government, but reiterates the government's commitment to a peaceful resolution to the conflict, say that the government and the people of Tigray have always been committed to a peaceful resolution of the conflict and are ready and willing to entertain all serious peace overtures.
Tigray External Affairs Office released a statement in response to Amnesty International's latest report on sexual violence in Amhara region, calling the methodologies used disturbingly flawed. The statement was issued on November 10, 2021, following Amnesty International's latest report on sexual violence, allegedly committed by Tigrayan forces in the Amhara region. The statement criticized the report's reliance on a remote video calling application to conduct interviews with alleged survivors, as well as self-serving testimonies from government officials. The statement said that the government would nevertheless undertake an investigation into alleged crimes and would work to ensure that any person involved in perpetrating atrocities is held accountable. It also adds that the Tigrayan forces are disciplined despite the allegations that they have encountered growing testimonials about the humanity of the Tigrayan forces in the areas they took control of. The government of Tigray has repeatedly called for an independent investigation by an impartial international body to look into all atrocities committed. Garhusernai is a small town in the northwestern part of Tigray where residents say Eritrean forces unleashed unspeakable horrors on November 13, 2020. Just days away from the one-year anniversary of the massacre, our reporters were able to go on the ground and speak to witnesses. Wintakidana has more.
This is a small town of Garhusernai in Agela, in the central zone of Tigray. On November 13, 2020, Eritrean soldiers would go on a killing rampage, shooting at the small town's residents and killing many.
My
name is Priest Gabriel Hannes Take. I'm a resident of Garhusernai. It was on November 13, 2020. They shelled the city first. People just started running to hide in caves to save their lives. Shortly after, the Eritrean soldiers started coming into the city. It was around 11 a.m. when they started shooting at residents.
My name is Abadit Gabramedhan. I was trying to escape Zadu. We left the bodies there and spent the night elsewhere.
The residents explained that after the Eritrean soldiers brutally murdered civilians, they refused to let the families bury the bodies. They said that they had to see the bodies of family members and friends on the streets for 5 days being eaten by animals.
We begged them for days. We told them it was inhuman against our culture to leave dead bodies unburied. They refused for 5 days but later said that we could. It was probably because they couldn't take the smell anymore. They told us we could bury some of the bodies where they had been laying, on the street. They wouldn't allow us to bury them in churches.
Me and my neighbors asked them to give us the bodies, but they refused. I watched dogs eating the corpse, and when I tried to chase them away, the Eritreans told me to stop, and asked what difference it would make if the dead was eaten by dogs or not. So we gave up and stopped asking them.
The presence of Eritrean soldiers was denied by the Ethiopian and Eritrean authorities for months, even after their presence was confirmed by independent media and international partners. This atrocity is just one of many committed by Eritrean soldiers in Tigray. But the question remains, will the Eritrean government and its soldiers be held accountable for their actions?
The people of Tigray have endured unspeakable horrors orchestrated by Abiy Ahmed's regime and its allies. Mass killings of civilians, sexual violence, famine, and now an all-encompassing siege that has devastated the community in every aspect. Our reporters have uncovered a massacre in Mikhail Abi, vicinity of Dagua Tambain district, where soldiers killed mourners saying their goodbyes to loved ones. Sabla Warklama with the details.
Ongoing conflicts, the people of Tigray have encountered atrocities such as sexual violence and mass killings. Reports from the UN, Amnesty International, and other international human rights organizations show that civilians have been deliberately made victims of these atrocities. This is Mrs. Kiros Hailu. She is a resident of Mikhail Abi vicinity at Dagua Tambain district. She lost 2 members of her family, her husband Bakhratzion Kinfa and her son Wulda Kiros Bakhratzion, along with her 4 other neighbors as they were paying their tributaries at a mourning house. She told our reporters what happened, choking on her own tears.
They told us to get out and said, "Agenyenacho," which means we got them in Amharic. 2 soldiers got out of their car and they took them out of mourning house. Then they killed them all like goats. I went crying to my son first. I tried to pick him up, but he was dead. I was shocked. I yelled to my God, "Did I do something bad?" Then I asked my neighbors to help me carry his body in my back. I couldn't because it was so heavy. Then we tried carrying him by his legs and hands, but we couldn't do that either. He fell from our hands and then I started crying and kissing my son. And then I went to my husband, who was a little away from where my son was lying on. I cried and kissed him too. My husband's condition was really bad. Then I left them there and ran away to save my life because I was scared.
Halaka Gabra Mariam Gabra Meskel was one of the people who were shot by the soldiers. They left him there assuming that he just died. However, he was alive and survived from the shooting, and he describes the situation like this.
They asked if there were any militia around, and we told them that we have no any militia here. They couldn't trust us at all, so they told us to get out of the mourning house and lay on to the ground. They started shooting us. Many have died of the shootings, but I survived. They left me there thinking that I was dead.
Priest Waldemariam Gabrahewat was a witness when the Ethiopian soldiers went into the mourning house and accused the people sitting there and gathering in the name of mourning house and supporting the Tigrayan forces. He says that they killed civilians, not the militia, as they claimed.
They asked us if there was any militia or junta mangas. We all said that we were all civilians and there is no militia here. And then they took some people from the mourning house and let them lay down. I was standing there with other people and then they started shooting at them.
Another family of a victim is Nugusti Gabra Mikael, who lost her husband, Priest Gabra Gyurgis Waldakidan. She says that they killed him brutally.
They came to our neighborhood and my husband was sitting over there with his cross in his hands. The soldiers told him to stand up and he didn't refuse. He just got up. The soldiers then asked if he knew any militia here and he said there is no militia around, and then they forced him to go there and killed him.
Fazi is a town in Gulo Meqeda district, eastern Tigray. It's one of the places destroyed due to excessive violations of human rights this past year. Our reporters on the ground spoke with residents. Meron Yamana reports.
Hagusha Bata, a mother of 2, is a resident of town of Fazi, which is located at Gula Meqeda district. Because of her poor health conditions, her mother Silas Garazihir used to take care of her. Mrs. Silas is 70-year-old woman who used to take care of her children and grandchildren all together. However, she was killed by the invaders recently, leaving her helpless daughter Hagusha and the kids behind with no one to take care of them. Her other daughter, who has now taken the huge responsibility of taking care of the whole family, says the consequences of the war are unbearable to her.
I couldn't afford to buy the groceries, the spices, berbera and shiro. I couldn't afford any of those. Where would I get them from? I couldn't feed the kids. I am facing serious difficulties.
This boy is named Desalegn Kibron. He was shot by the soldiers who killed his grandmother. Now he is recovering and he is trying to get up. He testifies the killings of his grandmother, Mrs. Silas, and describes the scene this way.
They fired at me and I jumped, but a shrapnel hit me here. It went in through here and went out that way. Then they shot my grandmother dead.
Other residents of Fazi town, Mrs. Firoy Neolai and Mrs. Hadash, say that their lives and the lives of their families are at risk if they don't get life-saving food assistance the soonest possible.
I'm a mother of 4. I used to live at Zalambasa. I used to work and raise my kids there, but I'm displaced now and I have nothing to eat. My neighbors are taking care of me, but still, I'm in a difficult situation.
I don't have a single bowl of flour to make duff of. I have a relative named Letta Mariam. She is the one who helps us out. She frequently checks for how we are doing and brings us some food on which we depend. We are just living with hope. All they want to do is to wipe us out and then inherit our land. So we should fight them back so as to ensure our existence.
Abraham Garamedin from Tigray Bureau of Health says infants and mothers are the ones who are highly affected by the man-made hunger in the Gula Makhada district.
ክሳብ ሕዚ ካብ ዝገበርናዮም 10,000 ዝኸውን መመማይ
From the 10,000 sorting we have done so far, we found out that 1,411 children are affected by medium and high malnutrition levels. 99 children are affected by extreme hunger, and 1,542 mothers are exposed to a medium level malnutrition. These mothers were supposed to get a monthly CSP++ medication. However, due to the siege casted upon us, these mothers could not get their prescribed medications.
That wraps up our news for the evening. Thank you for tuning in and good night.